Stephen Colbert smiled as he read the intro, but it was tighter than usual, sharper at the corners. He looked into the camera with that signature blend of mischief and polish. Tonight's guest is Rachel Maddow, the queen of primetime parsing, the reigning champion of slow burn analysis, and, some might say, my mirror in a darker suit. Laughter, applause, but not the roaring kind, the kind that waits to see where this is going. He held up his hand. She's here tonight to talk about democracy, division, and that new book of hers that I'm pretty sure came with footnotes longer than my last monologue. More laughter, but it thinned as the name settled. Rachel Maddow walked onto the set. No wave, no smile, just focus. Her suit was gray, unembellished, buttoned. She moved like someone who'd entered spaces like this many times, and never once believed she owed them charm. Stephen rose from his chair to greet her. They shook hands. His grip, warm, ready to joke. Hers, firm, with no extra weight. They sat. Stephen started light. Rachel, welcome to the show. I'll admit, I cleared an extra 3 minutes in case your answer to my first question comes with citations. She nodded. Just once. That depends on whether you're asking a question or delivering one in a tuxedo. The audience laughed again, but Stephen blinked. Just once. She hadn't returned the rhythm. She had caught it and redirected it. He leaned forward. All right, let's talk about democracy. You've said recently that the system isn't just under stress, it's under siege. That's heavy language. Rachel nodded again. It's accurate. Stephen smiled. But is it helpful? You know how this works. Fear sells. Outrage wins. Isn't this just your side's version of fire alarm politics? Rachel looked at him. Still, the difference between a fire drill and a fire, Stephen, is whether the room is already burning. The audience quieted. Stephen picked up his note card. Let's back up. You're a journalist. I'm a comedian. So when we both say the country's in trouble, how are people supposed to know who to take seriously? Rachel said, you tell jokes to soften reality. I report facts that don't need softening. The country isn't waiting for clarity. It's drowning in its absence. Stephen exhaled. Do you think this format, shows like mine, contribute to that? Rachel replied, I think any room that filters truth through applause ends up negotiating with silence. There was a pause. Stephen nodded, but his smile had dropped. Okay, so what are we doing right now? Because this isn't exactly the McLaughlin group. Rachel said, no, but it's still a room where the guest is supposed to say just enough to fit the frame. Stephen raised his eyebrows. And you're not going to do that. She looked at him. I don't edit myself for rooms that laugh before they listen. The audience didn't laugh. The room was still. Stephen reached for the next card. But his rhythm had changed. He wasn't leading anymore. He was navigating. Stephen Colbert looked at the next question on his card, then didn't ask it. He folded the card in half, set it down, then looked at Rachel Maddow and said, You're not playing along. Rachel replied, You didn't invite me here to play. The audience laughed, but it was thinner now, the kind of laugh people give when they're not sure what else to do. Stephen said, Look, I respect you, but my audience expects conversation, not interrogation. Rachel's voice was calm. Then let them hear one. Stephen sat back. His face didn't change, but the tone did. So this is you being unfiltered? Rachel answered. This is me being uninterested in being shaped. The room had lost its pulse. The audience had stopped trying to anticipate the turn. Because the turn wasn't coming. This wasn't banter anymore. It was stillness. And it was not letting up. Stephen asked, Do you think this moment we're in, politically, culturally, is recoverable? Rachel didn't hesitate. Yes, but not through comedy. Not through satire. Through consequence. Stephen nodded, but his jaw flexed. So I'm part of the problem now. Rachel looked at him. Not cold. Not kind. Just clear. You're part of the machine that makes the problem feel digestible. Which might be worse. That one hit. The audience didn't move. Stephen leaned forward slightly. You think I'm softening the truth? Rachel said, I think you're making it palatable, which is another way of saying it's being stripped of urgency. For a long second, nothing happened. Stephen looked down. His thumb tapped the edge of his mug. Then he said, That's heavy. Rachel replied, So is reality. but we keep asking it to weigh less so it fits the format. Someone in the audience coughed. Another cleared their throat. Not because they meant to, because the room was tightening, and no one wanted to be the one who broke the silence. Stephen asked, "Why come here then?" Rachel answered, "Because this is where people pretend they're already informed. And I wanted to see what happens when they're actually asked to think." Stephen Colbert reached for his mug. He didn't sip. He just held it. His hand stayed steady, but his face told the truth. The interview was no longer within the boundaries of what his show was built to carry. Across the desk, Rachel Maddow waited. Not defiant, just present. Stephen said, "This is supposed to be a place where we talk about serious things without losing the room." Rachel answered, "Maybe the room needs to be lost." Stephen blinked, then laughed. "Not with humor, with habit. That's not how it works here." Rachel said, "Then maybe that's why it doesn't work anymore." In the control booth, a producer mouthed, "Cuts soon." Another replied, "She's not letting him land it. Can we pivot? Not without making it worse." Back at the desk, Stephen took one more swing. He asked, "Do you believe media can be fixed?" Rachel replied, "Not until we stop calling it media and start calling it what it is, power." He tried again. "And what do you want from that power?" Rachel said, "I wanted to stop asking for laughter before truth." That was it. No punchline, no wrap-up, just a sentence that left nothing on the table for a second act. The audience sat like they'd all exhaled at the same time, but only halfway. Stephen looked into the camera, then back to Rachel. He reached for a transition. "Well, But the producer's voice came in through his earpiece. "Wrap it now." Stephen paused, then turned to the audience. "We'll be right back." The red light went out. Rachel stood. Stephen didn't. Not right away. He stayed seated while she handed her microphone to the stagehand. No anger. No exit line. Just the sound of a guest who had said what she came to say, and nothing more. The cameras came back. The lights adjusted. Stephen Colbert smiled, but it didn't sit right. He delivered the next joke. Clean. Precise. Well-timed. The audience clapped. They even laughed. But something was missing. Something no one could quite name yet. Backstage, the producers reviewed the playback in silence. The lead director finally spoke. It wasn't a meltdown. Another replied. No, it was an incision. They didn't decide whether to air it. Not right away. They just sat with it. Because the segment didn't need editing. It needed reckoning. Stephen's next guest was a musician. Funny, bright, warm. But the conversation floated. Every line sounded like a costume someone else had worn better the night before. And when the segment ended, no one in the audience stood. After the taping, a stagehand approached the producer and asked, "Is she okay?" The producer said, "Maddow." The stagehand nodded. The producer replied, "She's fine. She just left the room whole." That's what we're not used to. Stephen returned to his office. He didn't debrief. Didn't vent. He sat down, loosened his tie, and looked at the note card with Rachel's name on it. He flipped it over and wrote one line. Not every silence is an absence. Then he tore it in half. The episode aired on a Thursday. The network left it untouched. No edits. No disclaimer. No rearranged segments to dilute the silence. Just the interview, exactly as it happened. At first, social media didn't know how to hold it. Some called it awkward. Others called it brave. But most people watched in full before posting anything at all. Because it didn't feel like a moment to clip. It felt like something you had to sit with. A columnist wrote, "What broke wasn't the format. It was the illusion that every conversation must resolve." Another wrote, "Maddow didn't hijack the show. She held it still until it stopped moving." But the headline that spread the fastest came from a quiet blog. "She left without being reduced." In the writer's room the next day, no one joked about it. Stephen didn't offer a takeaway. He didn't explain it on the next show. He just moved forward, but slower, like someone who knew he had been shown something true, and wasn't sure yet what to do with it. At MSNBC, Rachel walked into her office like she always did. She didn't reference the segment, didn't ask about ratings, didn't quote herself. But before her next show, she paused at the edge of the set, looked out at the camera, and exhaled once through her nose. Then she stepped into the light, without changing a single line. Weeks passed. Clips from the interview circulated quietly. No viral caption. No trending hashtag. Just slow down sharing. A message here. A link there. People send it not to prove a point, but to hold a question. Did you see this? Why did it feel different? Was that supposed to happen? Stephen never revisited it. But in a quiet moment after a taping, he told a new writer, "You don't always know when the room changes. But when it does, you stop performing. You start listening." Rachel said nothing publicly. But in a rare radio interview, she was asked, "Was that moment on Colbert uncomfortable for you?" She replied, "It was real. Sometimes that's more uncomfortable than anything else." Then the host said, "People called it confrontational." Rachel said, "I didn't raise my voice. I just didn't hand it over. No one tried to replicate the moment. Because you can't recreate what refused to be shaped in the first place." The crosstalk shows went back to shouting. The comedians went back to dancing around the edge of truth. But the people who watched the whole segment, beginning to end, remembered how it felt when two people sat at a desk and stopped pretending they were there to entertain. The silence didn't go viral, but it stayed. And for those who heard it, it never stopped speaking.